Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. My name is Gursan Singh. As many of you may know, I converted to the Sikh faith from Christianity about 35 years ago. Now recently I saw this video, which was really appalling. There was a Mr. Anderson. He calls himself a pastor, minister for the Christian faith. And most of his remarks about Sikhi are completely false and at the least misleading. Now, I won't address every single one of his very racist and bigoted remarks towards Sikhs and people from Punjab, but I will refer people to a really well-made video by Bhai Sahib Simmer Singh, who spent about an hour rebutting all of these points that this Mr. Anderson made in his video. Today, I want to talk about some of my personal experiences as growing up as a Christian and what I went through. So, as I said, I grew up as a Christian in Southern California is where I grew up. And I was part of the Church of Christ, to be specific. Now, the Church of Christ has a lot of its origins in the Southern Baptist denomination, we'll put it that way. So I experienced some of the bigotry which Mr. Anderson exhibits in his little talk there. I will have to say, to be fair, that when I was growing up, I didn't experience the extreme bigotry that is exhibited by Mr. Anderson. Although I did experience a lot of closed-mindedness at the hands of several of the Christian ministers, so-called Christian ministers that were the head of our church there on Town Avenue, and were part of this Pacific Christian College, which my father was deeply involved with ever since in the 1960s there. My father was actively involved in the church there on Town Avenue, and also deeply involved in this Pacific Christian College. And he was part of the board of directors at one time, and also a deacon in this Christian church there on Town Avenue in Pomona, where it is. Now, I will say that I learned a lot of good teachings about belief in one God there at the Christian church. But what I saw was a lot of hypocrisy. We would go to church on Sunday and then come home, and during the week, pretty much, I won't say do whatever we wanted, but there wasn't the 24/7 adherence to a, we'll call it a code of conduct for people of faith. It was more of a kind of go to church and get your sins, as we called it, forgiven by Jesus on Sunday. Now this was a real fallacy that I saw in the Christian faith. It was this idea that Christians were obligated to go to church on Sunday, but they could do pretty much what they wanted and then come and ask for forgiveness. That may be oversimplified, but that was sort of what I experienced in a simplified form. Now, my father was a businessman. He owned a mobile home business, and he grew up during the 1930s where there was he was very poor during that time. So a lot of his emphasis was on making money and making profit. So when I was growing up during the 1960s, my father spent an enormous amount of time making money, and he prided himself in giving a lot of money to the church, giving a lot of his time to the church. not only this Church of Christ there on Town Avenue, but also the one there, the Pacific Christian College. It's now called Hope University. And so I think it was really an inordinate amount of time. I really saw this as a fallacy that my father was so involved in material things that it took him away from his spiritual life. And in fact, I have to admit that around the mid-1970s, my father left my mother for another woman. And he started carousing, drinking alcohol, and started carousing around with other women. So it was not a happy situation, and I think it reflects on the lack of discipline and lack of a code of conduct, which was really lacking there in the Christian church. And I think it is really indicative of how the Christians I observed anyway did not have this sense that they were responsible for their own actions. It was more like they could go to church on Sunday, ask Jesus for forgiveness, and then give it all over to Jesus. That was kind of the idea. So I observed that, and then I also observed my father making concerted effort that he could almost buy his way to heaven. Now, I'm very sad to say, but as a result, my father built a trust with this Pacific Christian College, and then later, like I said, this Hope University, where he put pretty much all of his assets and money into this trust later on. And it was more of like, as I said, the sense I got was he was trying to buy his way to heaven. Now, he told me in so many words that when I converted to Sikhi, that he was disowning me, and that he would not leave me any inheritance or anything. He really didn't want to have anything more to do with my life. Now that was around 1980 or so when I told him I'd converted to Sikhism, and it's pretty ironic that he was drinking a shot of whiskey when I talked to him. I believe it actually was bourbon, and here he was telling me about this. Now, I don't want to put down my father necessarily, but I want to tell you the truth about the things that I observed in this Christian faith. Now, what is very sad and disappointing is how the members in this Pacific Christian College, specifically Dr. John Rao, who was a pastor there, actually supported my father and really, I think he could have done more to counsel my father in getting back together with my mother and getting back to some real principles and morals. I tried to get my mother and father together to do counseling. I took them one counseling session, but my father wouldn't have anything to do with it. At any rate, this Dr. John Rao, I think, supported that, this idea that my father could do what he wanted. And I don't have the specific proof, but it makes sense that my father could get away with this because there was so much money that my father had donated and had promised to this Hope University and Pacific Christian College, that it makes sense that this Dr. John Rao would have supported my father and not really given him a hard time about leaving my mother and getting away from correct values. So this is what I experienced with my father, that he wanted so badly for me to be a Christian minister that he promised me that he would support me and he would send me to theology school, etc., etc. And I'm convinced that he would have supported me financially as well. And as it turned out, of course, like I said, when he passed, most of the money went to, or a lot of the money that he made went to this college, and then also to his new wife, which was really indicative of his moral corruption in a way that he, I think, got from this Christian university and from this Christian church. Now, I'm not putting all the blame on the Christian faith or the Christian church. This is just my personal experience, is what I believe happened. Now, I will say some other things that I had direct experience with. There was a Christian minister, a young Christian minister at our church there in Town Avenue, who I really respected. And it turned out one Sunday we went back there and he was gone. And we asked everybody what had happened to him, and evidently he had taken off with one of the young teenage girls and left his wife and kids. It's really very disturbing, and certainly didn't reflect well on the Christian faith. So I'm not saying at all that all Christians will do this type of thing. I am saying in this particular instance, it shows how I think many people in our church anyway believed that you could do whatever you wanted and just ask for Jesus' forgiveness. This was kind of a real downfall I saw of the Christian faith. Now, the other things I saw were that this John Rao, Dr. John Rao, he was a doctor of theology evidently. He was very good friends, as I indicated, with my father. And so when I had converted to the Sikh faith, he called me in Oregon, where I was living. And he asked me why I had converted to the Sikh faith. And I told him it just fit my lifestyle better. I was seeing a lot of hypocrisy in the Christian church. And we didn't go into too much detail. But he told me a little bit about how my father would really like me to come back to being a Christian, etc., etc. And so I continued to be with the Sikh faith, obviously, because it didn't really impress me too much what he was saying. I saw him about 4 years ago. He's passed away since then. But it was very interesting as well that he continued to try to get me to come back to the Christian faith. He was telling me a story about how he went to a place where there was a lot of statues. It was a Hindu mandir or temple. And he was saying, oh, I went to one of your temples, and there was all these gods and goddesses and idols and things. You know, of course, that's forbidden in Sikhism as well as in Christianity. But he didn't know the difference between Hinduism and Sikhism, and he was a doctor of theology. So I think this really reinforces this fallacy that this Pastor Anderson had brought up in his video, that he saw Sikhism as believing in idols, when in fact Sikhi is completely against the worship of idols. We only have one God, and we only put one God before us. And it's a timeless being, unknowable, and much the same as the Christian God. So what I'm saying is that there's a widespread misinformation about what Sikhs are about, and many Christians are closed-minded to the idea that Sikhi has a very principled and relevant worship of one God, which is very similar to the Christian beliefs. Now, obviously, there's a lot of differences between Christianity and Sikhi. And I just want to touch briefly on some of those. The biggest differences I see is of course, that the Christians believe that Jesus is as they put it, the way, the truth, and the life, and that you can only be saved through Jesus. Now, this really disturbed me when I was young. I didn't see how it was possible that God would create this world with billions of people, and that he would only show a few people this Christian faith, and that Jesus would be the one that would save them. First of all, Jesus is a person. And even if he did exist, which is very questionable as far as the evidence, both archaeologically and through philosophy and writing. So I think that what I saw as a young man, as a person growing up in the Christian faith, was that there were a lot of questionable teachings that were being done there. And when I started to get involved more in Sikhi, I saw that there was this belief in one God, and that no person was above God. And this is where I see Christianity failing, is that they set Jesus up like a cult. And, well, let's face it, when Christianity started 2,000 years ago, it was treated like a cult. And Christianity was facing many other competitions with other religions, with Judaism, with the Romans. They had many gods and goddesses. So it would make sense that the Christians would make up these stories, if you will, or this lore about Jesus committing or doing these miracles and rising from the dead. These are all things that are completely unprovable through archival or through historical facts. In fact, what I saw was that the writings in the Bible are hearsay. They're secondhand accounts. So unlike the Sikh faith, which has absolute proof that the Sikh gurus wrote these poetries and shabads and praises to God, it's historical fact. We have the actual writings. So these are things that I saw that were distinct differences between the Christian faith and the Sikh faith. And so, as you can see, I continue to remain a Sikh, and even recently, just shortly before my father died, he again tried to get me to become a Christian and to denounce the Sikh faith in favor of the Christian faith. But I told him no, that I was really very committed to the Sikh faith. And it's really served me very well. Waheguru has been has blessed me very much. And I couldn't want anything more, really. And I'm very thankful to my father, in the sense that he did bring me to realize that the Sikh faith is what I really want in my life. So it enabled me, in other words, to research into what I really wanted and understand that these important differences. So again, I don't want to put down the Christianity. I really respect the Christian faith. I hold them in high regard. But I do want to point out that there are some bigots in the Christian faith, and there are some very good people too as well. But I choose these truths in Sikhi to be above these other teachings. Anyway, thank you for your time. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.